Greetings everyone, my name is Sai, and we're doing another Portal video, because I guess I didn't have enough already. Now, whenever you hear Portal being talked about in the media, someone inevitably brings up how tightly designed it is, and how none of it is wasted space. But what exactly do they mean when they say that? What exactly is a tightly designed game? Well, I think the best way to learn about it is to examine how Portal paces its learning curve, and to do that, we need to look at each test chamber individually. So without any further ado, let's begin. So the game starts as we wake up locked in the relaxation vault, with a countdown timer steadily going down from 1 minute. We start off with about 20 seconds or so of silence, allowing you to get a grasp on the movement controls before GLaDOS starts talking. Then once the countdown timer ends, the portal opens, and you see yourself for the first time. This is a very important moment for obvious reasons. It twists your mind a bit, gets you thinking on the game's wavelength. Then after that, you step through the portal, and this part is very important to note. The design and shape of the room that you're in forces you to walk all the way around the relaxation vault, and that helps you mentally process what just happened. Then after that we have a little baby's first puzzle that's not really worth talking about. You put a cube on a button. You did it! Hooray! Test Chamber 1 is the Portal Carousel, where there are 3 separate rooms, each with something you need, and a portal rotating between them. Now, if you've played Portal 2 with a commentary on, you'll remember how they updated the puzzle to be better by allowing the player to choose the portal location, which, yeah, is a significant improvement. But that doesn't mean the original design is bad. In fact, I like how the portal changes in the exact order it needs to allow you to solve the puzzle as quickly as possible. Box, button, door. Box, button, door. Test Chamber 2 is actually pretty genius in terms of its layout for the first-time Portal player. When you enter the room, the door will be locked until GLaDOS finishes speaking, forcing you to look out the window at the portal gun, which is constantly rotating and firing portals, which allows you to get a sense of the layout of the room before you even enter it. But at the same time, the portal gun rotation is perfectly timed so that as soon as the game lets you leave, the portal is in the correct spot to get you out of the first little room, which helps speedrunners and repeat players. Now, a failing of this room's design is that if you're too slow or take a bit too much time to get to it, you'll have to wait a total of 22 seconds before the portal circles back around to you. So you go through the portal and the door to your right is locked, meaning you have to go down into the floor and grab the portal gun. Again, smart idea, because it means to get out of the pit, you have to use a portal, thus familiarizing yourself with the portal gun. Also, notice how the room is almost entirely covered in white space, allowing new players to experiment with placing their own portals before moving on. So now the door is unlocked, and you can proceed. Test Chamber 3 is perhaps the single most important chamber in the entire game, and possibly also the hardest one depending on who you are. Of course, it's extremely simple if you know what you're doing, but in terms of teaching new players things, it's a brilliant bit of design. So, you have to use your blue portal to cross the gap, which everyone figures out pretty fast. Then, you're supposed to fire your blue portal at the wall and use the orange portal to cross the second gap. It seems obvious in retrospect that the exact same tricks you use to solve this problem as well, but it usually takes a lot more time for people to figure that out. Because what you have to realize is that up until this point, the blue portal has been your entrance portal, for lack of a better word. And the idea that it could also be an exit portal doesn't really come intuitively to a lot of players. And so it's actually fairly common to see new people breeze past the first half of the chamber, only to end up jumping up and down in the pit in the second half. This seemingly obvious idea that portals work both ways is something a lot of people don't put together when they're first starting out. So this chamber is absolutely vital in correcting that misconception before moving on. Test Chamber 4 is basically the first chamber again, but this time you have the portal gun with you to help reinforce basic skills you've learned up till now. Sort of like a mini exam. Then Test Chamber 5 is basically the same thing, but a bit trickier with 2 cubes you have to get. Again, here we have basic skills being reinforced. The idea that you can use portals to cross space and get yourself out of holes, and the skill we learned in Chamber 3 that portals work both ways. Fun fact, Test Chamber 6 is actually the first chamber that can kill you. So, pretty simple puzzle we have here, and again, one that was later refined in Portal 2. The fact that the laser can't kill you in Portal 2, has immediate feedback when compared to the energy pellet, and the smart idea to start the platform raised instead of lowered, so the player has to move the portal to raise it up again when all things are done, makes the concept of the game stick with the player a lot better. But on the bright side, Chamber 6 in Portal 1 does have my favorite joke in the game.
Unbelievable. You.
Subject name here.
Must be the pride of.
Subject hometown here.
Test Chamber 7 is a repeat of 6, except the orange portal is placed under the receptacle, and you have to place the portal where the pellet meets the wall. It also introduces you to the concept of moving platforms, which will be really important in the next chamber. So, Chamber 6 was the first chamber where it was technically possible to die, but Chamber 8 is probably where most first-time players experience it. Chamber 8 combines skills you learned in Chamber 6, 7, and 3, because you have to use the orange portal to bounce the pellet off the wall and into the receptacle. Now, Test Chamber 9 is actually one of the only chambers in Portal I think is badly designed. So, the idea is that you're supposed to shoot a portal through the hole and use that to cross the Emancipation Grill. But the problem is, the hole is big enough to look like the cube could fit inside of it, and indeed, it can if you work at it enough. So I've seen players get stuck here for 20 minutes trying in vain to toss the cube through the hole, despite the much easier solution. So if I were remaking the chamber, I'd make the hole a lot smaller, to the point that it's obvious the cube won't just fit through it to help with that. Otherwise, this chamber is just getting you used to the idea that Emancipation Grills can be used as obstacles that you have to think around. Chamber 10 then teaches you how portals can serve momentum 4 times in 4 different ways. First, there's this jump, where no matter where you place your blue portal, you'll always fall onto the platform. Then we have the same idea, except you have to fall into your portal. Notice here how the black panels even start to fall away as they go, resembling something like a diving board. It's subconsciously priming you to want to jump. Then, in a bit of an excessive touch, they also just flat out tell you what to do with the sign on the floor. The next puzzle has the orange portal on the floor this time, requiring you to place the portal on the wall now. Then do that once more and the chamber's done. Chamber 11 is like Chamber 2 in a lot of ways. There's a portal gun spinning in the center of the room, which communicates to you as a player, hey, go get that thing. And you're also locked in the starting section of the level, forced to examine the entire chamber from above before beginning. Except now, because you could just portal out of there and skip that, they ingeniously time it so that the portal rotation below will lead you into acid if you try to step out before the game wants you to. Now again, this is one of those final test rooms that just quizzes you on the basic knowledge you should know by now before letting you proceed. So after grabbing the portal gun, a button appears in front of you, and the final challenge requires you to use the orange portal by yourself to escape. You should also note here that the room you find yourself in is both completely safe and covered in white walls, allowing you to experiment before moving on. Test Chamber 12 is a revisit of skills learned in Test Chamber 10, but now with you being in control of both portals, and with a small puzzle incorporated into it. Test Chamber 13 is one of those put all those skills you've learned thus far to the use tests, so I don't really have that much to say about it, apart from how I really like that there are 2 solutions to the final button. You can either go back to the first room and grab the cube you used initially to open the door, or you can stand on it yourself and fire a portal, which teaches you that you don't always need to have a cube to use a button. Test Chamber 14 starts off looking like it provides you with 2 different ways to go, but if you try to move right, you'll find you can't proceed without a cube, so the game is actually hurting you to the left. And in that direction, we find a pellet receptacle with no pellet, which means that we'll have to use the 2 opposite sides of the chamber to reach our goal, grabbing the cube for the right from the left, and the pellet for the left from the right. Then, one basic fling later, you've got your cube and can advance to the right side of the test chamber. Now, in this room, you can initially use your portals to cross the gap, but because you need to bring the pellet with you, you're forced to learn basic platforming in order to continue. Also, notice how the light from the receptacle shines on the ceiling above it, which helps you place the portal where it needs to go without having to go all the way over there yourself to do it. Test Chamber 15 starts with a recap of the flinging mechanic, and it teaches you how to double fling yourself to gain momentum. Then we move on to the next room, and it's important to note here, this is the first time we've seen pellets interacting with Emancipation Grills, so the developers have set the room up so that the first thing that you see is that they can pass through them, which otherwise might not have been an intuitive leap. Then, just in case you didn't quite get the double flinging mechanic earlier, this next room makes you perform it 3 times to ensure that you've learned it. It's a very important skill to have, especially once the escape has started, so it's important to make sure the player has a firm grasp on it. Then the game introduces you to the idea of using portals and moving platforms to navigate pits of acid, which will be useful in Chamber 19. And finally, a lesson in using portals to quickly navigate places under a time limit before finally getting to the elevator. Damn, Chamber 15 really is a workhorse for teaching and refining skills. Test Chamber 16 is your first introduction to turrets, and as such, starts by locking you off in a room while GLaDOS explains the things in here can kill you, so that you don't just run face first into a turret. As you walk into the room, the turrets opposite the glass begin to shoot you, teaching you that these things are best to be avoided, and that glass can stop their bullets. Also, the first turret is positioned backwards, so you can safely pick it up and learn to drop it without the risk of dying. The next turret is placed very far away from you and has a clear line of sight, so if you try to run out and grab it, you'll just end up dying. But it also has white panels underneath it, teaching you that you can use portals to knock over turrets. The next turret is raised, so you can't shoot the floor underneath it like you just did to the other one. There's also a helpful little X over it, letting you know that you can shoot a portal there and drop down on top of it. The next two turrets are placed opposite each other, forcing you to use the boxes to knock them over instead of doing it yourself. Again, here we have red X's helpfully marking where to place your portals. And then we have two final rooms that just sort of reinforce all these basic concepts. Just don't fuck up knocking them over like I did.
Target, who are you?
Chamber 17, the famous companion cube test. The idea of this chamber is so simple. Lots of little puzzles that require cubes to solve, but only providing you with one cube that you have to keep track of. The first hallway once you make it up the steps is genius in terms of design because it forces you to hold your companion cube out in front of you like a shield to survive, and teaches you that cubes can redirect pellets, which will be useful knowledge later in this very test. The rest of the chamber is just reinforcing already learned skills, with of course the twist that you only have the one cube. Then we finally get to the famous part of this chamber, having to incinerate the companion cube, which, while simultaneously sad and hilarious, also teaches you how to incinerate things, which will be crucial for the final battle, so good idea to slip it in here when you're not really under threat of dying due to neurotoxin. After that, the majority of Chamber 18 is one big final test for everything you've learned thus far, utilizing almost every skill the game's taught you, and as such, I don't have a whole lot to add. I will say though, the final bit of 18's chamber doesn't really teach you anything new, but it's pretty much only there because it's a cool idea and is fun to do. So I appreciate the inclusion of that right before the shit hits the fan. And finally, Chamber 19. This test is pretty easy in comparison to 18, but it does two important things that I think are brilliant. First of all, it gets you thinking on your toes. Portal has, thus far, been a very play-at-your-own-pace sort of game, and so because they're about to throw a big twist at you, the moving platform sections gets you thinking fast under a time constraint to help acclimatize you. Secondly, by throwing 3 or 4 puzzles at you while you're on the moving platform, it makes doubly sure you've already used both your portals and have no escape back to safety once the twist happens. And yeah, about that twist, can we just talk for a second about how up until now, Portal has had almost no music, and the music it has had has been very quiet and faint and off in the background. So once the twist happens, and you're being lowered into the fire pit, suddenly, having this badass music kick in makes your brain go into overdrive. That fucking music really does make this twist one of my all-time favorite video game moments. It gets your heart pumping and adrenaline rushing. And so, death having been narrowly avoided, and heart pumping from the attempted murder, the developers have now provided you with all the skills necessary to make it to and fight GLaDOS. Portals are weird. The ideas and intricacies of them are not something that comes naturally to most people, and that's why it's necessary to have a tutorial as lengthy and extensive as the one that Portal does. But by weaving it into the narrative and gameplay, the tutorial is almost non-existent. You don't feel it like you do in other games, because it is so gradual and hidden from view, behind excellent level design and world building. And that's what all the game critics mean when they say Portal is exactly as long as it needs to be and is extremely tight. And that is why Portal's level design is fucking brilliant. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video and want to see more like it, you should go check out my Patreon. That Patreon helps me pay my bills because, as it turns out, it's actually really hard to make videos if you're living under a bridge with no electricity. I mean, all the homeless people keep stealing my nice microphones. So go check that out at patreon.com/Psy and see if anything happens to catch your eye. Also, since you obviously like Portal if you've gotten this far, I have a shit ton of other great Portal videos. 2 separate 10 things you should know about Portal 2, the top 5 plot holes in Portal 2, a video about Blue Sky, which is a fucking great Portal fanfiction which you need to read, and an analysis of whether or not portals can move. And finally, just want to say a very special thank you to my lovely Patreon patrons, Matt Flowers, Isaiah Christo, Aaron Grath, Saws Bucky, and Krista, for helping support my endeavors.